You won't know when the test begins, because it already has. 2026 didn't arrive to give you a fresh start. It arrived to watch how you behave under pressure. When you're tired, do you stay disciplined or do you loosen your standards? When no one is watching, do you still act with intention? When things feel unfair, do you complain or do you adapt? This year isn't judging your goals. It isn't impressed by your plans, your promises, or your motivation. 2026 is judging your habits, not the habits you talk about, the ones you fall back on when life gets uncomfortable. Every day, quietly, the test runs. In small moments, in ordinary decisions, in how you respond when things don't go your way. Some people won't even realize they're being tested. They'll drift, they'll react, they'll repeat the same patterns and call it bad luck. Stoicism sees something different. It teaches that pressure reveals character, that difficulty is not a setback, it's an examination. In this video, you'll learn 7 Stoic tests that 2026 will quietly place in front of you, not to punish you, but to reveal who you've trained yourself to become. This isn't motivation, it's preparation, because the test is already running, and how you show up will decide everything. 1. The first test. Comfort is the trap. The first test of 2026 won't announce itself. It won't arrive as a crisis. It will feel harmless. Comfort. Not rest, not recovery, but the quiet kind of comfort that slowly lowers your standards. This is where most years are lost. Not in chaos, but in ease. A life that is never demanding doesn't make you peaceful. It makes you soft. Stoicism never treated comfort as evil, but it never trusted it either. Because comfort, when left unchecked, erodes discipline the way water erodes stone. Slowly, silently, and without resistance. The first test of the year shows up in ordinary moments, when the alarm goes off and no one would blame you for staying in bed. When a task feels uncomfortable and avoidance seems reasonable. When doing what's easy feels justified because you've worked hard. None of these moments feel like failure. That's why they matter. Pressure doesn't weaken people. Unchallenged ease does. The Stoics understood something modern culture avoids. Discipline is not punishment. It's training for instability. Life doesn't test you when conditions are ideal. It tests you when you're tired, distracted, and unmotivated. And the only thing that holds in those moments is what you've trained, not what you intended. If your daily life never asks anything of you, you are not being preserved. You are being unprepared. This is why voluntary difficulty mattered so much to the Stoics. Not because suffering is noble, but because weakness is expensive. Choosing small discomforts on purpose trains your nervous system to stay steady when larger ones arrive. Cold instead of warmth. Effort instead of convenience. Consistency instead of indulgence. These choices don't make you harsh. They make you reliable. 2026 will not require you to be extraordinary. It will require you to be durable. Durability isn't built in moments of inspiration. It's built when comfort tempts you to lower the bar. And you don't. This first test is subtle. That's what makes it dangerous. There will be no applause for choosing discipline over ease, no recognition for doing the hard thing quietly, no immediate reward. But every time you choose comfort without question, you teach yourself that standards are optional. And every time you resist it, even briefly, you reinforce something far more valuable than motivation. Self-command. The Stoics didn't ask, "How do I feel today?" They asked, "What is required of me?" That question changes everything, because the real danger of comfort isn't that it feels good, it's that it slowly convinces you that effort is unnecessary. And once effort disappears, so does strength. The first test of 2026 is not how hard life becomes. It's how soft you allow yourself to get before it does. 2. Reaction or command. The second test is faster than the first, and it's easier to fail. You don't see it coming. It happens in the space between what occurs and how you respond. Something goes wrong. Someone disrespects you. Plans break. Pressure spikes. And before you can think, your body reacts. Emotion surges first. Words follow. Actions come later. Most damage is done in that order. Stoicism begins with a hard truth. Events do not control you. Your interpretation of them does. The test is not what happens. The test is whether you give up command in the moment it happens. Modern life trains reaction. Instant replies, instant outrage, instant validation. Speed is praised. Pause is treated like weakness. The Stoics saw the opposite. They understood that the smallest delay between stimulus and response is where freedom lives. Not freedom from difficulty, freedom from self-betrayal. When you react automatically, you are not choosing, you are being chosen for. Emotion takes the wheel, habit sets the direction, and later, reason is left to justify the wreckage. This is why emotional control was never about suppression. It was about command. A Stoic does not ask, "How do I feel?" They ask, "Who is in charge right now?" Anger is not dangerous because it exists. It is dangerous because it moves quickly. Fear is not destructive because it appears. It is destructive because it rushes decisions. The second test of 2026 will repeat itself constantly. In traffic, in conversations, in setbacks you didn't plan for. Each time the question is the same. Do you react or do you respond? Response requires something rare, a pause. Not a dramatic pause, not a long meditation, just enough space to interrupt the impulse. One breath, one moment of awareness, one decision reclaimed. That pause is not passive, it is an assertion of authority. The Stoics trained this deliberately. They rehearsed restraint. They practiced silence. They learned to let the first impulse pass without acting on it. Because the first impulse is rarely wise. It is old programming, old habits, old fears dressed as urgency. When you obey it automatically, you fail the test quietly. No one sees it, but you feel the cost later. Regret always arrives after reaction. Clarity never does. Command looks different. Command sounds slower, moves cleaner, leaves less damage behind. It does not mean you never feel anger or frustration. It means those emotions do not decide for you. In 2026, situations will not become gentler. If anything, they will become more compressed, more demanding, more exposed. Pressure will ask you to move fast, to speak quickly, to defend immediately. That is exactly when the test matters most. Because the person who controls the pause controls the outcome. Not every battle needs an answer. Not every provocation deserves engagement. Not every feeling requires expression. The Stoic understands this. Power is not loud. It is deliberate. The second test is not about staying calm all the time. It is about refusing to hand over command when it matters. And every time you choose response over reaction, you strengthen something essential. Not confidence, not pride. Authority over yourself. That authority is what carries you through the rest of the year. 3. Expectation or acceptance. The third test is quieter, and because of that, it cuts deeper. It shows up when effort doesn't lead to recognition, when results lag behind discipline, when life doesn't respond the way you think it should. Expectation forms naturally. You work, you improve, you endure. And somewhere along the way, the mind starts negotiating. This should be easier by now. Someone should notice. This shouldn't be happening to me. That is where the test begins. Stoicism draws a hard line between what you prefer and what reality delivers. Suffering grows in the gap between the two. Life does not operate on fairness. It never has. It never promised to. The Stoics didn't become strong by believing life would reward them. They became strong by removing that expectation entirely. Because the moment you expect fairness, you hand your emotional stability to conditions you do not control. Disappointment is rarely caused by events themselves. It is caused by the story you told yourself about how those events were supposed to go. The third test of 2026 will ask whether you cling to that story or release it. Acceptance, in Stoic terms, is not surrender. It is clarity. It is seeing the situation exactly as it is, without layering it with resentment, entitlement, or comparison. When you accept reality, you stop wasting energy arguing with it, and that energy becomes available for action. Most people confuse acceptance with weakness. The Stoics knew better. Acceptance is what allows precision. It removes emotional noise. It sharpens judgment. When life is unfair, anger feels justified. But anger rarely improves your position. It narrows vision. It hardens posture. It keeps you locked in reaction instead of adaptation. The Stoic response is colder and far more effective. They ask, given this reality, what is the correct move? Not the move that feels fair, the move that works. 2026 will place you in situations where the rules feel uneven, where effort and outcome do not line up, where silence follows your discipline. That is not a mistake. That is the test. If you break because reality doesn't match your expectations, you fail quietly. If you adapt without complaint, you gain something most people never develop: resilience without bitterness. The Stoics trained for this by reminding themselves daily. Nothing is owed, not recognition, not comfort, not ease. This doesn't make life bleak. It makes it clean. Without expectation, you are free to act decisively, free to adjust, free to endure without poisoning yourself with resentment. The third test is not whether life is fair. It isn't. The test is whether you can remain effective when it isn't. Those who can move forward without demanding fairness become dangerous in the best sense of the word, because reality cannot destabilize them. And a year like 2026 will reveal exactly who has learned that lesson. 4. Scattered effort or focused control. The fourth test exposes where your energy leaks. It doesn't arrive as failure, it arrives as exhaustion. You're busy, you're trying, you're doing many things at once, and yet nothing feels stable. This is not a problem of effort, it's a problem of direction. The Stoics warned against this long ago. They saw how easily the mind reaches for control where none exists. Other people's opinions, uncertain outcomes, future scenarios that haven't happened. Energy spreads thin across imaginary battles. Anxiety grows. Focus dissolves. The test of 2026 is not whether you can do more. It's whether you can stop doing what isn't yours to carry. Stoicism is built on a ruthless distinction: what is within your control and what is not. Most suffering comes from ignoring that line. When you try to manage everything, you end up mastering nothing. The Stoic response is not withdrawal. It is precision. Attention becomes selective. Effort becomes deliberate. Energy is invested only where it can actually change something. This feels uncomfortable at first. Letting go always does. You stop explaining yourself to people who won't understand. You stop chasing outcomes you can't command. You stop rehearsing conversations that never happen. And something unexpected occurs. Strength returns. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind that comes from alignment. The fourth test will ask you, repeatedly, is this within your command, or is it noise? Every time you answer honestly, your life becomes simpler and harder at the same time. Simpler because fewer things demand your attention. Harder because excuses disappear. You can no longer blame distraction or chaos or circumstances. You see clearly where responsibility begins and ends. That clarity is power. 2026 will overwhelm anyone who tries to control too much, but it will reward those who narrow their focus without apology. Not everything deserves your response. Not everything deserves your effort. The Stoic does not scatter themselves across the world. They gather themselves inward, and from that centered position, they act with force instead of friction. The fourth test is not about calming your life. It is about choosing where your strength goes. Once you pass that test, exhaustion stops being constant, and control stops being an illusion. 5. Avoidance or training. The fifth test reveals how you relate to hardship, not the dramatic kind, the slow, grinding kind that wears people down over time. Most discomfort isn't sudden, it's repetitive, unexciting, easy to postpone dealing with. That's why avoidance becomes tempting. You tell yourself you'll face it later, when you have more energy, more time, more clarity. But later quietly turns into never. The Stoics understood that hardship does not weaken people by itself. Avoidance does. Every time you step away from something difficult, you reinforce the belief that you cannot handle it. That belief compounds. The fifth test of 2026 will not ask whether you enjoy difficulty. It will ask whether you prepare for it. Training is different from endurance. Endurance is surviving pain when it arrives. Training is choosing discomfort before it arrives. The Stoics practiced this intentionally, not to punish themselves, but to remove fear from hardship. Cold, hunger, fatigue, silence. These were not tests of toughness, they were tests of stability. When you train under controlled difficulty, your nervous system learns that discomfort is survivable. It stops signaling panic. It stops demanding escape. Avoidance keeps fear alive. Training dissolves it. In 2026, challenges will not ask whether you're ready. They will appear without permission. Deadlines, conflict, loss, pressure. Those who avoid difficulty in calm seasons are overwhelmed in harsh ones. Those who train early remain composed when it matters. Training does not make life harsh. It makes you dependable. You no longer need ideal conditions to function. You no longer collapse when convenience disappears. The Stoic does not seek pain. They seek readiness. The fifth test is passed quietly. No one sees it. No one applauds it. But when difficulty arrives, and it will, the difference becomes obvious. One person scrambles. The other stands steady, not because life was easier, because preparation was deliberate. That is the difference between avoidance and training. And 2026 will expose which one you've chosen. 6. Outcome. Obsession or process loyalty. The sixth test arrives when patience runs out. You've been consistent, you've shown up, you've done what was required, and still the results are slow. This is where many people begin to bargain. They question the process, they look for shortcuts, they wonder if the effort is worth it. Not because the work is wrong, but because the reward is late. Stoicism draws a sharp distinction here. Results are not promises. They are consequences, and consequences operate on timelines you do not control. The Stoics warned against tying your sense of worth to outcomes, not because outcomes don't matter, but because the obsession with them weakens. When results become the focus, discipline becomes conditional. You work when progress is visible, you hesitate when it isn't, and slowly, commitment erodes. The sixth test of 2026 asks a simple question. Will you remain loyal to the process when nothing is reinforcing it? Process loyalty is quiet. It doesn't feel heroic. It doesn't offer reassurance. It requires you to act correctly without evidence that it's paying off. This is where character is formed. The Stoics anchored themselves to duty, not reward. They focused on what could be done today, not what might happen tomorrow. That focus creates stability. When outcomes fluctuate, the process remains. When motivation fades, the structure holds. Those who endure without visible progress develop something rare: self-trust. Not confidence based on success, but confidence is based on consistency. In 2026, you will face long stretches where improvement is subtle, invisible, easy to doubt. This is not failure. It is the test. If you abandon the process because results lag, you teach yourself that discipline is negotiable. If you stay, you reinforce an identity that cannot be shaken by delay. The Stoic does not ask, "Is this working yet?" They ask, "Is this the correct action?" That question keeps you steady when others drift. The sixth test is not about winning quickly. It is about remaining intact while time does its work. Those who pass it don't need constant validation. They move forward quietly, knowing that consistency compounds whether it is noticed or not. And in a year like 2026, that quiet loyalty becomes decisive. 7. Drifting time or conscious urgency. The seventh test is the most unforgiving one, not because it is difficult to understand, but because it is easy to ignore. Time does not pressure you, it does not threaten, it does not demand. It simply moves forward, and because it moves quietly, people assume there is more of it than there is. Days feel ordinary, routines repeat, weeks pass without friction. This is how urgency disappears. The Stoics treated time as a moral resource, not because it was scarce in theory, but because it was wasted in practice. They understood that you never lose time suddenly. You lose it gradually, through delay, not acting when action is required, postponing decisions that matter, waiting for conditions that never arrive. The seventh test of 2026 asks a question that has no comfortable answer. Are you living as if time is limited, or as if it is endless? Those who assume they have time drift. They plan endlessly. They delay difficult conversations. They tolerate situations they should leave, not out of laziness, but out of the quiet belief that there will always be another chance. Stoicism challenges that belief directly. Memento mori was not a reminder of death. It was a reminder of responsibility. When you remember that time is finite, your standards rise. You stop spending energy on trivial conflicts. You stop rehearsing excuses. You stop pretending that tomorrow will correct today's neglect. Urgency, in the Stoic sense, is not panic. It is precision. It means acting when action is correct and not delaying simply because delay feels safer. 2026 will not announce its midpoint. It will not signal its final quarter. One day, you will realize the year is nearly over, and by then, patterns will already be set. The seventh test is passed in advance. By choosing clarity over comfort, by deciding before circumstances force you to, by treating time as something entrusted to you, not something owed to you. The Stoic does not rush blindly. They also do not drift passively. They move with awareness. They act with intention. They do not postpone what matters because they understand something essential. Time does not reward intention. It only records action, and 2026 will do the same. The seventh test is the most unforgiving one, not because it is difficult to understand, but because it is easy to ignore. Time does not pressure you, it does not threaten, it does not demand. It simply moves forward, and because it moves quietly, people assume there is more of it than there is. Days feel ordinary. Routines repeat. Weeks pass without friction. This is how urgency disappears. The Stoics treated time as a moral resource, not because it was scarce in theory, but because it was wasted in practice. They understood that you never lose time suddenly. You lose it gradually, through delay, not acting when action is required, postponing decisions that matter, waiting for conditions that never arrive. The seventh test of 2026 asks a question that has no comfortable answer. Are you living as if time is limited or as if it is endless? Those who assume they have time drift. They plan endlessly. They delay difficult conversations. They tolerate situations they should leave. Not out of laziness, but out of the quiet belief that there will always be another chance. Stoicism challenges that belief directly. Memento mori was not a reminder of death. It was a reminder of responsibility. When you remember that time is finite, your standards rise. You stop spending energy on trivial conflicts. You stop rehearsing excuses. You stop pretending that tomorrow will correct today's neglect. Urgency, in the Stoic sense, is not panic. It is precision. It means acting when action is correct, and not delaying simply because delay feels safer. 2026 will not announce its midpoint. It will not signal its final quarter. One day, you will realize the year is nearly over, and by then, patterns will already be set. The seventh test is passed in advance, by choosing clarity over comfort, by deciding before circumstances force you to, by treating time as something entrusted to you, not something owed to you. But conscious urgency goes further than awareness. It reshapes how you spend your ordinary hours. You become selective with attention. You notice how much time disappears into distraction, explanation, and low-value habits. You begin asking a sharper question before each commitment. Does this move me closer to what matters, or simply keep me occupied? This is where many hesitate, because urgency exposes misalignment. It reveals relationships that drain more than they give, work that keeps you busy but stagnant, habits that consume time without building strength. Drift allows these patterns to continue unnoticed. Urgency forces a decision, and decisions are uncomfortable. The Stoic accepts that discomfort as part of the test. They understand that clarity costs something up front, but drift costs far more over time. So they act early. They correct course while change is still manageable. They speak when silence would preserve comfort but erode respect. They leave when staying would be easier but dishonest. Not recklessly, not emotionally, deliberately. Because urgency without judgment becomes haste, but urgency guided by reason becomes alignment. The Stoic does not rush blindly. They also do not drift passively. They move with awareness. They act with intention. They do not postpone what matters, because they understand something essential. Time does not reward intention. It only records action, and 2026 will do the same. By now, the pattern should be clear. 2026 is not a moment. It is not a turning point that arrives on its own. It is a continuous examination that runs quietly in the background of ordinary life. Not testing intelligence, not testing ambition, but testing character under pressure. Every test you've heard is simple in isolation. Comfort, reaction, expectation, control, hardship, process, time. None of them feel dramatic. That's why they work. Years are not lost in collapse. They are lost in repetition. In the small decisions no one sees, in the standards you relax when you're tired, in the pauses you skip when emotion pushes you to react. Stoicism never promised an easier life. It promised a steadier one, a way to remain intact when pressure increases, a way to stay clear when noise grows louder, a way to act with discipline when motivation disappears. 2026 will not transform you into someone new. It will reveal who you have been training yourself to become. Each day, the test runs, without ceremony, without witnesses. Only you know how you respond. Some will drift through the year unchanged. Others will be shaped by it deliberately. The difference is not talent. It is not luck. It is not timing. It is the quiet choice to hold standards when it would be easier not to. The Stoic understands this. They do not wait for better conditions. They do not negotiate with discomfort. They do not delay responsibility. They meet the year prepared, because the test does not ask who you intend to be. It asks who you are when nothing is watching. This is the test, and how you show up is the answer.